Okay, so we're talking about the astrology of 2023. Right? We come together, we do Kundalini Yoga, we evolve ourselves, we activate our life force, we move it, we channel it, we direct it, and therefore we start to become more aware of our capability of consciousness. Right? We're always conscious. To be alive is to be conscious, but there is the opportunity to evolve your access to consciousness. Ultimate consciousness, it is said, is always available to us at any moment. It's whatever we have that creates a resistance to that prevents us from connecting to ultimate consciousness. That could be ignorance, that could be resistance, that could be even a vibrational frequency, right? We are at a particular vibrational frequency at our state of consciousness, and the more we access more consciousness, or the expansion of consciousness, our vibrational frequency rises. So we're constantly on this journey, and moving into a new year gives us an opportunity to serve as somewhat of a benchmark, right? A rite of passage. So the astrology of 2023 is as it appears to be, which is very front-loaded in the beginning part of the year up until like the springtime and then trickling into October. We have a lot of activity, we have a lot of drama, we have a lot of change, we have a lot of opportunity, we also have a lot of gaining of clarity coming very quickly in the first part of the year. And there are consistent themes in the astrology, because I'm going to tell you a little bit about the numerology. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Chinese astrology, and both of which I'm very, very minusculely versed in. I mostly refer to trusted sources on that. And then Vedic Astrology, which is my area of interest in gaining expertise. And the reason I want to bring those three into alignment is to give you an understanding of the consistency among the divination tools. And when you can see consistency among various schools of thought as it pertains to the divination of future understanding, when you see similarities between those three different schools, you start to gain a deeper understanding of the theme of what the energy has to present. Yeah? So I thought that was a kind of an interesting way to solidify the mythology of the coming year. Some of these consistent themes are sudden insights, shift of view, shift of method, shift of belief, higher frequency vibrations, connection and an introduction to a healing of the seventh chakra, divinity, collective requirement of change, natural remedy, back to basics, ancient forms of healing, the element of water is consistent, the concept of sacrifice is consistent, and also with the seventh chakra, higher vibrational frequency, connection to beings at a higher vibrational frequency. Now, whether that is related to like alien stuff or literally connecting to guides, God source, what have you. I have my assumptions, and I'll share those with you. They gravitate on the alien side of things in a little bit, which is fun. Also, to reconsider the word recovery. Anyone who's in a recovery program or is considered a recovery program, there is this theme around recovery that stems from the belief that something is broken and needs to be fixed. Right? There is a common theme, like, I'm an addict, right? This kind of idea of recovery, that in no shame whatsoever, there is this belief in, I can't control the addiction has control over me, and so I participate in these steps that help me maintain balance in that. From a more evolving perspective of recovery, it's a radical reclamation of what was always there. Sometimes the addict mindset says, I'm broken and I need to work with what's broken here. Radical recovery speaks of, it's an illusion that you're broken. We need to remind you how to jump over that, move through that to get to the recollection that you've always been completely okay. It's the lack of connection to that causes those maladaptive behaviors. Okay, so there's going to be some greater evolution around that, which is consistent. All right, that's kind of me just setting the stage. So let's talk about the numerology. 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 3 comes to the number of 7. 7 is, again, this year of sudden insights. Can be like a lightning bolt or falling off a cliff, is what I read somewhere, which is really interesting. A lightning bolt is like a quick evolution, right? Almost like jumping many levels of evolution. Falling off a cliff is its opposite, right? Is like, oh my God, like maybe despair or loss of identity, right? If some person comes to a new shift in perspective, there is also a loss of the old perspective and the identity that associates with that, which can feel like a lot of loss. Powerful, impactful, transformative, and perspective changing is the number 7. A powerful year for healers and those on a path of healing. Crown chakra is important focus. Many feel the increasing sense of loneliness and isolation. Working on the crown chakra connects the body to the soul and to the universal consciousness, where we become one with all instead of feeling all alone. How many of you have, through the experience of your own meditation practice, connecting to that divine source, lost a lot of that tendency toward loneliness? Right? It's that activation, right, toward a feeling of you being connected to something that doesn't require transaction. You know what I mean? And that can be relationship, that can be just staying busy and, workaholism, whatever. There's something about meditation, and especially extended periods of meditation, that create that. And what that does, extended periods of meditation are one of the prescriptions assigned to open up and activate the 7th chakra. So the more we meditate, the more we stay connected to our practice, the more that 7th chakra has the opportunity to grow, and the more people can evolve out of those feelings of isolation that I think have really been a thing. We become one with all instead of feeling alone. Okay, Chinese New Year. That starts on January 22nd. So the reason I did this last year, I brought in some energy of the water tiger, which was last year's animal for Chinese New Year. This year it is the water rabbit. And one of the reasons I bring it in is because there's so much focus on elements there, and elements give a big understanding of sort of some of the natural themes that come around. And it also really connects us to mythology. So the last time we had a year of the water rabbit was in 1963. Think of all the change, social evolution that went on around that time. We're talking about civil rights. We're talking about just a lot of people fighting for what women's movements, all of these things, right? Revolution, change in the collective. So that, again, is coming around. In whatever form it is sensible for it to be nowadays, right? Which can involve some of that, most certainly. The rabbit brings yin energy associated with moon and femininity. So this may be an invitation into women's movement picking back up, right? A new form of feminism, perhaps, because the old form of feminism doesn't necessarily apply anymore, I don't think, in a way that's sustainable and really embodying what is whole and real and divine about the feminine, right? There was a denial, there was an anger back then that just, I think we can start to move through and beyond. Let's see. It's said to bring luck, the year of the water rabbit. So maybe some good luck. Depending on how your chart moves, this might be a great time for investments. This might be a great time for moving into new relationships, starting new businesses, moving new ideas through. Bringing luck in partnerships specifically is one thing. Brings psychic shifts personally and brings political shifts and new leaders collectively. So keep our eyes out for something like that. Maybe also in the feminine persuasion. Wouldn't that be interesting? And now let's get into more of the Vedic Astrology, which is my area where I want to have you use those symbols that I just gave you and also apply it to this science that I work with. Now we're working with the start of the new year. Mercury's already gone retrograde, Mars has already gone retrograde. So we're starting the new year with a lot of retrograde activity, which, as I've suggested in previous classes, speaks to this idea of either getting your intentions done before the 28th or 30th when Mercury went retrograde, to either do it then or waiting until the middle of the month to set your intentions or allow for the energy of inspiration to come to you about your intentions. Because of all this retrograde energy, there is a lot of doubling back into the past for reflection, for healing, with related to things about communication, maybe anger, maybe arguments, maybe old relationship challenges, family dynamics, stuff like that can really be taken a new look at and maybe then healed, so we can move forward once these planets go direct. Now they go direct in mid-January. So Mars goes direct on the 12th, and I think Mercury goes direct on the 19th. So they're both within the same week, the third week of January. And it moves from that focus on the past to being very much in the present with a lot of mojo and a lot of energy and creative forward movement to take into the new year. Now, Mars and Mercury are aspecting at the same degree in a 6-8 relationship, which may cause, during that shift between retrogression and direct positioning, it may bring up some opportunity for resolution, for anger or dysfunction in communication, in relationship. Awareness of what's true and false starts to rise to the surface around this middle of the month, which gives a huge shift, right? And there's so much more energy that is contributing to that as I move forward. So once Mars and Mercury go direct, it's full steam ahead for action and like creative immersion. Now, right around that time, like I said, it's front-loaded. Saturn moves from restrictive Capricorn, where it's been for 2 years. Think of COVID. Capricorn's all about restriction, keeping you alone and isolated and separate from. It's now moving into its Mula Trikona sign of Aquarius. This happens on the 17th. This is where Saturn, in its Mula Trikona sign, does its best work. So it's in its own sign. When Saturn is in its own sign, it's less malefic and it's more actually productive. It actually brings benefit from the energies, like the grounding, supportive, containing energies. It brings a new awareness. Aquarius is kind of an air sign that's associated with Saturn, and it's all about the collective and expansion and group effort and group dynamic. So it brings a new awareness, a growing sense of a need for unity and harmony in connection, human connection. Opportunities arise to lift that heavy kind of polarization that we've been feeling collectively, right? Polarization in community is nothing more, again, than Saturn expressing its separation and polarities. So the polarities start to soften, and there tends to be maybe some level of like unifying, agreeing thing, where people are like, let's forget about our differences and like bond together. And Saturn will be in the nakshatra of Sharabhishta. Now this is the really interesting part of this 2023 stuff. I love the nakshatras because they give so much energy of the symbolism and the mythology around what to expect. This is what I love about the Vedas. It's all a story, but the story has two meanings. You can learn at the subtle level, and you can also learn at the symbolic level. And so this nakshatra of Sharabhishta, desire to uncover hidden secrets, hidden knowledge, related to natural law, related to the relationship with the divine, related to cosmic order. So we become more connected to universal energy collectively in some way, more so than before, right? Relationship to water and bodies of water, whether they will be healing or water might be a tool through which to gain some level of healing or some awareness around healing or some awareness around opportunity for collective benefit. Interest in alternative forms of healing, another theme that is consistent. Those desiring to become healed, those desiring to assist others in healing. There's going to be a larger demand and, what do they call it? Supply and demand. I'm like, get back into my left side of the brain. Mysterious diseases hard to diagnose and cure. Modalities often seen as magical, homeopathic, shamanic, pagan, alternative will be profoundly helpful, right? Self-initiated healing journeys, right? Initiating oneself into a yoga practice, initiating oneself into some form of spiritual education, 12-step programs, things like that, requires a sacrifice or a healing crisis. So some level of evolution from one paradigm to the higher is going to require some level of sacrifice. And in this context, I'd like us to reevaluate how we look at the word sacrifice in the same way that I'm asking you earlier to redefine how you look at the word recovery. Sacrifice has historically been something that seems like there's some sort of grotesque and violent act that was needed to occur. And so it took on this sort of dark energy, the idea of sacrifice. We're sacrificing babies and we're sacrificing animals, right? And this idea of this demonic, devilish concept around sacrifice, which is not correct. The intention for the meaning around sacrifice here is to let go in equal measure. The reason that animal sacrifices were what they were is because your animals were one of the most important things you had to your tribe, right? They provided assistance with the land, they provided milk and food and all of these sustainable things, especially if they were milk and egg-bearing animals, right? So to sacrifice one of them to receive a blessing, right, is kind of how that brutality, I think, came into the overarching understanding of what that means. But the reality is something you have to let go of in equal measure. So if you were so deeply rooted in one belief system and then something happens that causes you to have to let that go, or some identity structure, there's going to be some beautiful evolution, but the loss is going to feel equal in measure. Right? If anyone has ever gone through a life crisis where it creates an evolution, you know that there is something very soul-wrenching about that. And I'm not saying we're all going to be going through like these intense dark nights of the soul, but some people who have been resisting the evolution of consciousness may find themselves at a precipice where the universe is saying, sorry, I gave you a lot of opportunities, now I'm forcing you to change. So if there's anything that you're resisting on a subtle level or on a larger level that you know to be profoundly true, that you're just denying and hiding, it would bode more effectively for you karmically to initiate yourself into making that change as opposed to waiting for the universe to fucking slap it down on you. Okay? Let's see. And in some cases, that could be, dark nights of the soul, life crisis. Otherwise, it could be something like sacrificing, again, one worldview for another. Hero's journey. Hero's journey, I know that's somewhat of an antiquated model because in many ways it hasn't taken into consideration like Black, Indigenous people of color or women, so to speak. It's usually a metaphor for a white man or a European man. But still there are some symbologies and some mythologies in this that are relevant. Separation, right? Loss, some sort of irreconcilable thing. Initiation, what are you going to do about it? And then return. So that is, if you take the initiation, you move through the change, then you return to be of service to others. Otherwise, if you don't take the initiation and accept it, then you go back into separation. And you're always in separation until you take the initiative. And that's why, in some ways, growth is so hard and it can't be done in one lifetime. They're just things that our consciousness is not ready to evolve through and to yet. But in some contexts, when it makes itself available, it's our spiritual duty to really take that on. Otherwise, we're going to end up doing it at some point or another. Why resist the invitation now? Mm-hmm. If you have the means and the capability to do it. And they do say that God doesn't give you anything that you can't handle. So the rest is just renegotiating your relationship with fear. Okay, so let's continue on this nakshatra of Shatabista, also known as the Sky Watcher. Interesting progress in space travel, maybe. Let's just hope Elon Musk brings himself into some balance. Some level of, sustainability and, collective I mean, he would argue he is much for the collective, and I agree he is, but there's a lack of compassion there that is undeniable. Interesting progress in space travel. Let's see. Interesting information about other forms with advanced consciousness. Now, that can be, when you evolve to a higher frequency, you may connect to people in your dreams, your ancestors. You may be connecting to spiritual guides. You may be connecting to something that's channeling wisdom through you. We also may be, and this has been a suggestion for kind of a while now, like some sort of truth being revealed about other life forms making themselves known to us, and the covering up of that. Now, I know there's a lot of polarized views about that. That might be the polarity that starts to bring people together. Oh, Trump, Biden, whatever, but then, fuck, there's aliens. You know what I mean? Like, it brings you together. I've been swearing a lot. Sorry about that. It's just a lot of energy moving through me, and sometimes it comes out in the F word. Jupiter begins its transit out of Capricorn into Aries. So the transit starts to become noticeable because Jupiter's a big planet, it's a slow-moving planet. So January through April, we're going to start feeling the shift from Capricorn energy, from Pisces energy to Aries energy. Two very different energies. Pisces is the 12th sign of the zodiac, the last sign. Death, transformation, right? Shedding of skins, letting go of old. It's a water sign. It's a tamasic sign. So there's a heaviness. There is a sort of like womby nature to it. Water, the element, right? Carrying you from one dimension to another. Pisces also represents an end of an age, an end of an era, an end of a consciousness. But Pisces moving into Aquarius. But still, the ending of Pisces. It also represents completion. So on April 21st, right after, literally the day after a solar eclipse is going to be in the sign of Aries. And then the day after, Jupiter moves to Aries. It's going to be really intense. I can't wait to see what happens. And it's going to be a significant breakdown, rebuild period. Interpersonally and I think collectively. It's a new beginning, new perspective. Fire element's going to be a thing here too, because you're moving Jupiter into a fire sign. So, I mean, some have suggested that we are in the cycle of Rudra, which is an 11-year guaranteed cycle astronomically of solar storms. So we are in this 11-year cycle where solar storms are going to become more prominent. So there could be a little bit of that, and that historically has been a situation that can compromise communication on a grand scale with regard to the grid of electricity and all of these things. Let's see, water element to benefit in this way, right? Because water is a theme here. So water and fire are polarities. How can water assist us in this in some way? Aries represents action, movement, innovation, leadership, and independence. So when Jupiter comes into this sign of Aries, it's going to be very interesting for each and every person what house in their chart Aries rules. For me, it's my 7th house of relationship. That would be lovely, right? New beginnings. But it all depends on where that sits for you, the area of life that it will bring those qualities to. Right around that same time, January 22nd, Venus moves to Aquarius. So Venus has also been in Capricorn. Restriction, separation, lack of communication, right? And it also brought some maturity into relationship, maybe a little patience, maybe even a little need for detachment and isolation from relationship. Now, Venus on the 22nd is opening up into Aquarius, coming together, collective, group support, community. Again, getting rid of those polarities and bringing it into a unification. Detachment lifts and isolation starts to lift. So this is all happening right in the beginning of this between January and April. And the last thing I want to talk about are the eclipses. So we have the solar eclipse on 4/20, right between, right, when Saturn is moving into its new sign and Jupiter is moving into its new sign. This is going to call on partnership independence structures. So these are polarities, partnership independence, how these interact with each other. Okay? A couple weeks later, there will be a lunar eclipse in the sign of Libra on May 5th. And this is going to be similar, but different in that I think it gains more discernment around romance and freedom. Right? Relationship, independence, kind of a wider, broader, and then it comes into romance and freedom. Then the next two eclipses are in October. Solar eclipse on 10/4, which is about releasing and allowing, and then a lunar eclipse on October 28th in the sign of Aries, letting go, facilitating. And I forgot to mention that the solar eclipse in October is in the sign of Virgo, which is a mercurial earth sign. So it's going to have some energy around mind and matter. Any questions? I know I just threw a lot at you guys. Let me just stop this recording.